Peace, peace. What's going on? What's going on? All right. Here we go. Peace. Can everybody hear me? Peace. What's good? Can everybody hear me? What's up? What's up? All right. What's the deal? What's the deal? Just making sure everything is good here. Been trying out some new stuff. As y'all may have seen from the last video, just trying out some new things. But that's more so going to be for the pre-recorded videos, because I'm still figuring out how to live stream with all this. It's a lot. It's a learning curve, so I'm still figuring out how all this stuff works. So all the advanced stuff is going to be for the pre-recorded videos. In terms of the live streams, it'll be like this, because this is the only way that works for sure. Everything else I'm still figuring out. But other than that, how is everyone doing? Other than that, because at this point, for those who have been keeping up with the news, so on and so forth, the president has announced that we are expecting between maybe 100,000 and 200,000 casualties overall from this pandemic. So between 100,000 people and 200,000 people are said to will eventually lose their life because of this disease, which they say is relatively low because it could have potentially been in the millions. So they are essentially taking that loss and looking at it as a victory. No problem. Just giving people the data for those who may not know. So where does that put us? Where does that put those who are on the outer bounds of reality? How would you, in this case, deal with these things from an occult perspective? As we know, the reason that I named this occult conversation is simply because to say it simply, these are not the conversations that need to be repeated. Let me make this perfectly clear. These are not conversations that need to be repeated. This is information you absorb within yourself and you apply it. Information that remains secret. Okay? So much so that from now on, I'm going to disable comments, likes, dislikes, all that stuff. It's game over for that. There's no need for any of that. Okay? What's actually needed is work. So we don't need distractions. So we will continue to put in the work. Now, of course, for those who want to communicate and reach out, of course, you have the website, you have Patreon, whatever. So you can still contact me. But in terms of like building a community, in the sense of bringing people together, that's out of the question. As we clearly see, there's no need for people to gather anywhere for any reason at this point, right? So since there's no distractions, there's no need to gather, there's no need to repeat, there's no need to do anything other than put in the work to show and prove yourself that this is real, if you haven't proven it to yourself at this point. Let me say it in a different way. The reason why I don't really speak too much about these things is more so because at the end of the day, it is a distraction. Every day you can be distracted about what's going on with the virus, the disease, whatever you want to call it. Every day there's new data and information. People are trying to get back to work. People are uncertain about their future. How long is this going to last? So every day people are glued to their TVs and however they consume their news. And that can take up all of your time and energy because you are simply uncertain as to what the future holds, which is very uncomfortable for most people because they have built their whole lives around security. So when that security is lessened for whatever reason, then we are forced to find alternative routes to get things done. So in the case of alternative routes, this is what I'm going to be speaking on from this point on. Once again, this does not need to be repeated. This is completely secret. This will be the most secretive stuff you probably ever hear, just simply because I'm at a point with this particular channel, at least. Because you know, when you speak things of this nature, you are not generating no funds. Like, and I get no YouTube checks and all that. So I just do this channel to put out the information and to continue to show and prove the reality of the occult. It's not really about the pockets. It's not about the money, because I would be doing something else if it was about that. However, I will be moving in other directions, but not with this channel, because of course I do all types of stuff and I don't want to overload people with all different types of energies on this one channel. So I'm going to start spreading out what I do in other channels so people can fully consume what I do on a more vast level, instead of me just throwing out all types of random content. So on this particular channel, it will remain what you are used to seeing from me. It would just be more secretive, more about you, more about the self, more about the individual. This is fully Plutonian magic. This is where we're going. Because at this point, who else can you really rely on? We may not even feel comfortable going over each other's house like we used to. And again, this isn't just something that's going to wear off like it didn't just happen. Once this has fully took effect and people see how vast the damage is, this will be in the unconscious mind for a long time. 2020 will be that year that we look back on like we look back on 9/11 or any other significant year. This will definitely linger on. This has made a imprint on the unconscious mind as well as the collective conscious. Collectively, it has made an imprint, and unconsciously, it has made an imprint. Why? Because it actually will threaten your life if you meet the criteria, right? So it's serious enough for people to be serious, to stay in the home, right? The thing is, we are not really given much alternatives as to what are you going to do when you sit at home. We are only being told to work from home. For those who already are used to working from home, this is not a big deal. But for those who are not used to working from home, this is a very big deal. There are millions, I'm sure, of people who have to completely reevaluate their circumstances from all angles and dimensions. Again, that's something only Pluto can do, which is why this energy is heavily tainted with the energy of Pluto because of its power. Let's take it a step further, because now that we understand, this isn't something that we're going to gather a bunch of people together. Let me say it this way, because I'm not saying that that will not happen. You're going to see rebellion. You're going to see people begin to become fed up with the new rules and regulations, and people will be made examples out of because they strictly rely on the physical. If you strictly rely on the physical to express your disdain for the circumstances or the government, you will fail because they have consequences for anything you try to execute, because we are dealing with colonization. Never forget that that is an underlying current of this reality. It is all about colonization. At the end of the day, it may not be pushed in your face. It may be heavily disguised, but the ultimate goal is colonization. If they can rip you away from your heritage and you not know who and what you are so that they can fully control you, and they is just anybody who has secret information. This does not just pertain to the government, especially in these times. You will see Plutonian forces manifest in ways that you really haven't seen before. This is a time to become very acquainted with the energies of Pluto as I've been speaking. However, the dualistic nature of Pluto, because Pluto represents transformation, but Pluto also represents mass control, being able to control masses of people with propaganda as well. Every planet is dualistic, but since we are dealing with Pluto specifically, we must understand its components if we want to master the currency that it is generating right now. when it comes to survival, because Pluto rules over the zodiac sign of Scorpio, or the 8th house. Scorpio, or the 8th house, represents the house of secrets, further reiterating the idea of secrecy and intimacy. Secrecy and intimacy are the motifs of the 8th house. Can you keep a secret, and how intimate are you willing to get with those who are close to you? Physically, but not just physically, because Pluto is spiritual as well, which is where the spiritual or the shamanistic nature of Scorpio comes into play. So the 8th house is not just the house of secrets, but it is also the house of shamanism, or the house of poisons. That's original, right? That's, you're not going to hear that anywhere else. Not going to find it in the book. I said that, the house of poisons. What do I mean? The house of venom, the house where you learn how to master the darker forces of reality. For example, something like, let's just say, cocaine, where you can be heavily wounded and not have access to a doctor, right? We see that you try to go into a hospital and do anything, you may be faced with resistance if you are in a hot zone, right? So the idea of self-reliance becomes more of an idea or philosophy or even a lifestyle to adhere to, because we may not readily have access to resources like we have been used to. All this means is you have to learn how to do everything yourself from the ground up, from A to Z. Do you know how to completely manage your life as an individual without the assistance of others, so much so that others' opinions and actions do not determine your success or failure? Which is not the easiest thing to do, of course, because so many times success or failure is dependent upon other people, unless you take hold of the secrets or the venom or the elixir that allows you to demonstrate superhuman abilities, which are simply locked to everyone else. Shamanism helps us to unlock the hidden potential of the that remains hidden from sight until you decide to open it with what we call, I would say, the magic key, which is called the skeleton key. The skeleton's key is the key that unlocks all doors. There's a reason why it's called the skeleton key, the cryptid key, the mummy's key. What is it about bones? Whenever you see darker individuals, witches, sorcerers, necromancers, you always see skulls, human skulls or animal skulls. What is it about skulls that is so magical? We know what a skull is physically, but what is the magical nature of skulls that makes them so attractive when it comes to magical work? Is it the brain? The skull house the brain? Or is it deeper? Is it the actual substance of the skull, the actual carbon itself? Because the skull or the skeleton is the only thing that remains, or it takes the longest to break down. The skeleton takes the longest to break down, which makes it a symbolism or a symbol of immortality, to never die, to retain your consciousness even after death. This is essentially what it means to hold the skeleton's key, because you never forget anything. The purpose of occult work is to never forget anything, to retain your mind through the course of life happening. Normally, we should lose our mind as we get older, as our body begins to decompose and to become more earthy. However, through magical work called the Great Work, we are able to continuously advance our mind, so much so that we build an entire reality of consciousness that exists separate from the physical reality, so much so that when the physical reality begins to lessen, you begin to make your home on this self-created reality that you have generated because you have put in the work. So even in death, you are rewarded for the work that you put in, instead of waiting to see if you go to one place or somewhere else. You have carved out your heaven based off of your work, based off of maintaining and building your consciousness, so that even in death, you maintain everything that you have learned. Imagine having 10 times or 10 lifetimes worth of wisdom that you never forgot. It's things like this that completely breaks people's minds, because one lifetime is overwhelming for most people. So when you stack 9 other lifetimes experiences, emotionalism, relationships, children, all types of things that we consider dominant in our consciousness. But in all actuality, once all of these things dissolve into the nothingness so that it recreates itself, the only thing that remains is consciousness, which is why consciousness is the only reality, because nothing remains when everything else dissolves. When all things physical dissolve, consciousness is raised above the matter so that it can be shaped and molded with what we call the mind, because the mind is not centralized anywhere. The mind is everywhere, but we have to expand our consciousness to gain full access to our mind. If you are not expanding your consciousness, you will not have full access to what we have deemed the mind. There's many different. Look at that. Let's see. Are we back? I think we back. Look at that. Okay, we back in there. Oh, that shit is crazy. So did anybody hear anything I just said? Did anything I just said? That shit is crazy. It was frozen for a while.